Okay, this is slide 6, is it? Okay, slide 9. Okay, welcome to the ethical hacking and penetration testing course. My name is Victor, and I'm going to be your anchor for this course. So if it's the first time you're watching this presentation, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to leave a comment if this is the first time. You have a question, you want clarification, or you want me to give a heads up. Okay, we started by doing some foundation that had to do with penetration testing all the way to slide 9. Yes. So the first stage, don't forget, we talked about the different phases: planning and scoping, information gathering, attacking and exploiting, reporting and communicating results. That is the 4th step for us to conduct a penetration test. Now we want to look at the very first step, which is okay, let me get to the slide where I stopped the last time. Planning and scoping. So how do we plan? How do we scope a penetration test? Very, very important. So say before you get to start a penetration test, you have to first plan. Planning is very key. Like in project management, we say, if you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. So before penetration test starts, a formal discussion occurs between the penetration tester and the system owner, the sponsor. Various tools, techniques, and systems to be tested are agreed on. So what are the tools you're testing? How many websites are you testing? What networks are you testing? What servers are you testing? What mobile apps are you testing? Are you doing social engineering? Are you checking your staff? Are you checking your people, at times you can even do a policy procedure test, right? You're checking the principles, the procedures that you have within your organization that ensure security. You want to test those systems and see if they actually are meeting standards, right? You need to discuss what are the baselines, what are the scope, what are the items you want to test. Now, some of the things that should be involved in your planning and scoping is who is the target audience. You need to know to properly plan a test. What does the business do? What does the organization do? What are the objectives? Just last week, we started doing planning and scoping for operation testing for a company. It first starts with some set of questions. Then when they revert, you want to provide a document for them, a baseline document, just that will help you clarify most of these things. For instance, you need to know the objective. Some might be doing a test for different reasons, right? We're going to see that later on in this course. Then budgeting. How much you want to spend on a test will tell how much in depth you want to go and how long you're going to carry out that test. Take, for instance, if you want to eat food, how much budget you have will tell same pasta, for instance, or cereal, will tell where you should even eat that cereal. Should you take it in a 5-star hotel? Do you take it in just a restaurant? Do you take it? Should you take it in your home? If you take it in your home, it's quite cheaper. If you take it in a restaurant, a little bit more expensive. Take it in a 3-star hotel, more expensive. Take it in a 5-star hotel, very expensive. Maybe in a beach resort, far more expensive. So your budget will tell what is the depth of the test you're going to carry out. If you have a large budget, you could perform a more in-depth test, increase timeline for testing, increase scope, increase resources. If you have a very detailed test on a web application, you could go a lot level deep in the application to see the different vulnerabilities that you might have within the application. That would mean that you need more time. That would mean that you need more people. That would mean that even your reporting, your documentation you're going to do is going to take a little while to do, and it's going to have more pages, right? It then means the presentation you're going to do at the end of the day is going to take you quite a while to finish presenting. So that's why budgeting is very important when it comes to penetration testing. Resources and requirements. What resources will be with the assessment require? Confidentiality of findings. So you want to make sure that you clear up all of those during the planning and scoping. Compliance-based tests. So are you testing for PCI DSS? Are you testing for an ISO certification? Are you testing because you want to merge with another company? Are you testing? There was a time sometime that should be up to 5-6 years now. We deployed some applications on a server for a company. We later found out that they were having so much downtime. They were having, and for a newbie, for somebody not used to applications on servers, you might be thinking, oh, this is a result of maybe downtime, as a result of the technical issue. No? But after one or two occurrences, I saw that this is not as a result of this, but this is actually a result of vulnerabilities, hacked websites or sites that are vulnerable, affecting other applications you have within the server. So I reached out to their technical, their support. From their support, I was not getting the answers I needed. I told them to escalate. They escalated till I got to the core technical team. And I said, this is not a result of you trying to fix something or you have a downtime. This is a result of you being hacked. So after a lot more discussion, because we have quite a lot of infrastructure on that particular server, they now told us, okay, they acquired another company that had quite a lot of assets. And these assets are now affecting what they have on some of the servers, right? So it didn't take us 24, 48 hours. We moved everything we had there to somewhere else, back to our servers. Now, why am I saying this? If you don't understand the requirements, you won't be able to know how best to tailor your test, right? Take, for instance, the last scenario I just shared with you. What this company was supposed to have done before acquiring the new company is to first conduct a penetration test, vulnerability assessment on the company to be acquired, so that they have a clean bill of health before putting up all of those items on their new server, right? So it makes sense to make sure that you do those checks. Very, very important. Now, number 4, communication part. How should you communicate with your sponsor, with the owner of the project, within team members? Who is the trusted agent if something goes wrong? Let's say you are testing something on paraventure, something goes down, or a web application stops functioning while you're doing your test, or running a tool, or doing some probing, or doing some scanning. Who do you tell? Right? So you need to, it's not at that particular time when you try to do the test now that you now say, oh, something where it goes wrong, so you need to, in that plan and scope, you need to document or have that noted. Who are you going to tell where something goes wrong and the rest? So because these are possibilities. What is the end state? What kind of report will be provided after test? Is it just a slide presentation? Is it going to be a tete-a-tete, a chat? Is it going to be walkthrough of everything that happened? How is it going to be like? The technical constraints. Now, because you might be testing what is core business, that 8 core business functionality, that 8 core business continuity for an e-commerce portal, for instance. If you want to do vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, now it then means that you might halt ongoing buying and selling on that website. If you're testing a network, it then means that people's connectivity to either data, internet, intranet, files stored, or maybe a hard disk shared on the network, you're going to hinder some activities going on. So those are constraints. So what constraints limited your ability to test? So you need to note that. That's why if you're doing a test and you have a team of IT personnel within the company, it helps you so that you could plan out all of these things and it makes your test kind of smooth. Of course, provide a status in your report: not tested, tested, not tested, can't be tested, right? Because Tested, for instance, you want to say, okay, you tested all of this. Not tested, you didn't test it at all. They can't be tested because of things like, let's say, if you test those kind of things during work hours, it's going to affect business. If you test those things during the usage, or those things are typically on 24/7, and if you're going to test them, it then means that maybe we have to shut down or during a holiday or during an off-peak period before you can test those items. Because we know IT drives business. And if IT drives business, IT drives access control, IT drives websites, IT drives network, IT drives major stuff that companies and government agencies, ministry departments all over the world, they use. So if you have to test these things, at times you have constraints. There are some things you can't just test. If you need to test them, it needs to be a controlled test, right? Then disclaimers. Point in time assessment, results were accurate when when the pen test occurred. So you want to typically state that what you are actually reporting now is what you tested at the point of time you were testing. Nothing more, nothing else. 10 minutes after you tested is different from 10 minutes ago or before that particular thing happened. So you want to make sure that you have a timeline for your test. Comprehensiveness. So how complete was the test? Your test test the entire organization or only specific objectives? Of course, it's going to be specific objectives, except the client wants at the planning stage for you to test a whole lot of things. Rules of engagement. So you have timeline, location, time restriction, transparency, test borders, test boundaries. So you just need to have some kind of rules, timelines. You cannot just bump into the office. Oh, I'm the guy from the security company. We're doing a penetration testing on your infrastructure. Please, if you're using the PCs, make sure you just leave it, go by the corner. We want to test all of these systems to make sure they are secured. It doesn't work that way. That's why you need planning. So how long will the test be conducted, right? Is it a week? Within a month? A year? Are you going to be working all night alone? You could be going to working 4 hours during the day, 5 hours during the night. Are you going to be working on peak time or off-peak periods? Right? So timeline, location. Like an engagement we had last week, one of the things the company is saying that you have to perform the testing on site. So, or is it going to be remote, right? Does it cross international borders? So all of these things, you need to understand them. Time restriction, I talked about this already. Transparency, so who will know about the test? Will the organization provide resources to the testers? So if you're going to tell me things like, I have 100 PCs, I have 10 mobile, I have 50 printers, wireless or whatever kind of printers, I have so remote servers on so IPs. I have so network infrastructure. I have 2 servers. I have a cloud access to maybe where we store files on Amazon Web Services or Google Cloud Server. We connect it only through this system to do some authentication for something. So somebody's providing you a kind of well-rounded information of what you're testing and whatever. As against maybe a black, right? Where or a blind test where you're just told to test whatever. You're not giving detailed information, right? So you need to be aware of all of these things because you're going to select. Of course, if it's a blind test, for instance, so why they want you to do a blind test is so that they want to put you in a situation of an external hacker that doesn't have information about the company, they're just trying to hack, right? So that's also an approach to some tests. So in those kind of tests, you want to be seen as somebody that is coming from the outside world and that wants to hack, right? The only difference is that you are doing this and you're going to document it and you're going to explain what you've done and you're going to help them protect the system after what you've done. Whereas for a white box text, you're going to provide quite a lot of information, right? So you have some basics. Most of your reconnaissance and footprinting tags already, a bit of it will be given to you so that you can now plan out. So it's quicker, it's faster. You're not testing blindly. Then for boundaries, like I said earlier on, what will be tested? Is social engineering allowed to be used? Social engineering, we mean exploiting the human weakness, right? We said the humans are actually the weakest link, because if you have the best IT systems, if you have the best access control, if you have the best secure servers, if you have the most updated operating systems, updated softwares and whatever, even if you have the best physical access control, security, if your humans, if your staff, if your people are vulnerable, are susceptible to social engineering attacks, everything will fall apart. So the question is, while you're doing your planning, you're asking questions that, am I allowed to use? A friend once told me about somebody that was told to do a penetration testing for organization. All he did was to just, he didn't even come around. He called in, he did some reconnaissance and footprinting and got some information about what the organization does and some of the partner companies they might use and whatever, and just made a phone call to somebody within the organization and acted like the partnering organization and got all of the information he needed. That is social engineering. So the question is, will social engineering be allowed to be used? Now, if the in-house staff are not regularly trained on different types of social engineering attacks, it's going to be too bad. Why? Because this penetration tester can exploit that and might not now do quite a lot of technical penetration testing. Take, for instance, I call in and say, okay, of course, I've done some base studies, so I know a partnering organization or somebody that supports your maybe printers or support your server or support your internet or support your PC supplies or support something or do trainings for you. And maybe there's a portal that you guys need to log in for something. And I understand and I know who those companies are. And I call in and I say, okay, I'm calling from so and so. Oh, we did a training for you last 2-3 weeks or whatever. We're doing some upgrades and we understand that you're in charge of this. Because of how the system is built so that it's secured, we don't have access to your password and your whatever, but we need to do a migration from what we have now to a new service. I know your username is so and so, so please help me with the password. I'll do the upgrade now. I'll send it to you within 24 hours. By tomorrow, you're able to reset it. That is social engineering in action. So in the rule of engagement, you could decide if this should be allowed. Then physical security testing, of course, your doors, your access control, your swipe cards, your NFC cards for your doors, your server rooms, and all of that. So the question, your server rooms, who have access to it and the rest. So the question is that, do you want to also test that? How invasive can a pen test be? Right? How invasive can a test be? So how deep, how intrusive should it be? So you have to discuss all of that. Then you need to understand that penetration testing, you're somewhere within the law, right? Because you have permission. And it just a little here, a little there, you might go off within scope. So that's why legal restrictions, local restrictions, national restrictions, even companies' policies and procedures, you need to understand them. There are laws and regulations regarding cybercrime from every country, most countries, let me not say every country. So you need to consult your attorney before performing penetration testing work to ensure that you're within the legal bounds for your country. We have legal advisors that do all of our stuffs. You should have one, and you should also make sure that because it's just a little thing, and especially when you don't have a written agreement. So you want to make sure that you have a written agreement. I'm doing this recording from Nigeria. So if you're watching this video from anywhere else from the world, from any country, you typically we have a cybercrime act, an anti-terrorism act, a computer kind of law. Just check it up. you're going to see that may having access to a system that you shouldn't have access to will have some kind of fine, some years in imprisonment, and the rest. So that's why we say you're trying to do the work of an ethical hacker. Why? You're actually intruding, but you have permission. That is just a clear-cut difference. If you do anything without permission, you're committing an offense. And every country has a law that tells how many years you're going to spend in prison or how much fine you should be paying. So make sure you obtain written authorization. Your authorization should be clear cut. This is your get out of jail free card, right? White hat hackers always get permission. Many people are going to call me, okay, help me get so and so. I will ask you, do you have permission to get that? Once you don't have permission, that is against the law. Penetration testers can expose confidential information, so permission must be granted because you're going to have access to information that you are not supposed to have access to. But because you are doing that to help them protect, then you need to have permission to be able to do that. Third-party authorization, yes. For instance, I use Amazon Cloud Services. I have some certifications in the AWS tracks. Now, if you are doing testing on Amazon, on Google, or Alibaba, or Google Cloud, or Microsoft Azure, whichever one of them you are doing, they will always tell you what should be tested and what can be tested, right? If you check each of these sites, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Google, whether it's Microsoft, they will tell you the kind of services, because they have different services for storage, for computing, for database, for whatever. So they'll tell you what you can test and what you shouldn't test. And for what you need to email for them to open a window to allow you to test. So that's what we'll talk about third-party authorization. Or for instance, in the company you're testing, organization you are testing, if they have third-party integrations, right? You might need to now write them that you want to perform some kind of test, or in their documentation within their site, they're going to tell you how testing can be done. Of course, this is to help not to compromise the third-party vendor. Contracts. So you should have a statement of work that details all the things you're going to do. Master service agreements, where everybody agrees to the terms and what will govern future actions. Non-disclosure agreement, what's going to tell what you should disclose, what you shouldn't disclose, even after your assessment. Corporate policies. What do corporate policies allow you to do, right? Now, I've consulted for several organizations and they do have what we call the BYOD, bring your own device. Now, what you test in organization you are testing, what policies should you test? Don't forget I said earlier on that you could test, or did I say it earlier on? Okay, let me state it now. You could actually test people, mostly you could do that using social engineering. You could test processes. That's to say you could test guidelines. In this organization, if you want to do this and this is how you do it. You do it this way, you submit to Mr. A approves, submit to Mr. B, like that way. Or you send via email to this from Mr. A downloads it, documents it, send it to Mr. B. That process, right? You can have vulnerability in that process that makes it susceptible to an attack, an outside attack or internal attack. So you might be testing those processes. You can also be testing procedures. How are things being carried out? You could be testing platforms, right? So there are several things that you can be testing, platforms, softwares, applications. So you can be testing policies. I've mentioned people, procedures, platforms, policies, and the rest. Bring your own device is a policy, right? That a company can have. It's an information security policy. Now, it just tells what kind of device can you bring into the company. Did they allow you to bring a flash drive, a thumb drive? Did they allow you to bring your own PC? Can you plug your PC on their network? Because if I plug a PC on the network that have something like Wireshark or that have a box like Kali, I can have several tools that can run on it. I could start scanning the network. I could start seeing stuff. I could start doing some basic footprinting, draw the network topology, even if I'm just on the ground floor, depending on if they have some security countermeasures to it. So what policies are you going to be testing? And how often it's your policies, how often are they updated? So normally when you write an information security policy document, whether it's a password policy, how should your password be? Should it be a network policy? Should it be a disclosure policy? Should it be several types of policies? You could have version 1.0, version 1.01, 1.02, right? So you might be testing all of those. Export restrictions. Now, the Wassenaar Agreement precludes the transfer of technology considered as dual use. So how are you testing if the organization conforms to some of these agreements? Now, some countries have it as a different law or as an adapted law, just like the GDPR. So you might be saying, okay, if I need to transfer technology, can I have dual usage? Can I adapt the technology? So export restrictions, what are some of the kind of things you want to be checking? Or if you have the software used in a particular country, are you allowed to use that particular software within the organization? Strong encryption falls under these restrictions. Penetration testing tools could be considered surveillance tools and fall under these rules. So if I have a tool, like I just found out some years ago, there's a tool made by the Israeli for sniffing mobile phones used by governments and the rest. So some countries have banned some of these applications. So if you're trying to use that as a penetration testing, the question is that, is it permitted in that country? Is it permitted within that organization? The testing strategies, I've mentioned this during my introduction and in the previous module. So you have different testing strategies. So you can have black box where you don't have all of the information, gray box where you have limited knowledge, the white box where you have good amount of information. So for black box, no prior knowledge of the target. For white box, full knowledge of the network, system, and infrastructure. Gray box where you have partial knowledge, right? For instance, IP ranges provided, company emails to create phishing campaigns. So they could give you the email so that you could create something to deceive or do a kind of deceptive attack to the staff, right? So if you're giving that, it then means that you're doing a kind of a white box hacks. If you're not giving anything at all, no knowledge, just go in there, do your hack, document it, and let us have a report. That is a black box hack. Okay, types of assessment. I mentioned this earlier on slightly. It's intentional so that when I'm treating it now, you fully understand it. Goal-based pen test. A company might be carrying out a test just for a specific goal. It can be an objective. It can be a compliance. It can be, okay, you have PCI DSS, this payment card industry regulation, and it might be an ISO certification. They might just want to comply, or it might be government regulation. A pre-merger, you have two companies trying to come together. So we want to conduct tests on each of them to make sure that they are clean before we put them together. If not, what is going to happen is that you're going to transfer the vulnerabilities and the weaknesses of one company and you transfer it to the other company. So this is part of due diligence, right? Pre-merger, supply chain, red team. So I've talked about pre-merger. So let me talk about supply chain. Now, if across delivering value, you might need to, especially when you're integrating third-party other companies and the rest. If you need to integrate a few other companies or use APIs from several other companies to now deploy an application or deliver value to your clients. You might need to make sure that you pen test most of these things most of these vendors that you are associating with your delivery. Take, for instance, if I have an e-commerce website and I have 3 APIs I'm integrating on the website, I have 2 softwares I'm integrating on the website just to make sure that I'm able to sell items on my website. 3 APIs, I mean, let's say one API is payment API, Paystack, or PayPal, or 2Checkout, or Bitcoin. Bitcoin can be Binance, it can be BitPay, it can be any payment provider. SMS, maybe I send SMS alerts to my users when they try to make orders and the rest. Many APIs, for instance. It then means that for me to supply, for me to deliver value, I need to add all of these other components, right, to my delivery, across my supply chain, right from when my customer registers, he makes purchase, and I deliver to him. So this can be required Perl to align a connection between these supplier systems and your organization systems. So these are some of the reasons why you want to do a penetration test, to make sure that both at the SMS level, the payments level, the softwares, the modules, the templates or the boilerplates or the infrastructure you're integrating to what you have, you want to make sure that everything is secure. So these are reasons why you want to do a pen test. Of course, a rating conducted by internal pen testers of organization during security exercise to ensure defenders, the blue team, can perform their jobs adequately. Okay, so target selection. So you could decide what you're trying to target. What do you want to actually attack? So it can be internal, it can be external, it can be first party or third party hosted applications. It can be physical, it can be users, it can be your Ethernet SSIDs, it can be your applications. Or is it internal and external? It can be your web servers, it can be your on-site, or is it off-site? So this still has to do with scope. So you need to define what you want to test. Okay, so this is an explanation of those different types of targets. So are the targets hosted by the organization or by third-party service providers? Are they physical or contracted? Are they contracted or you're going to do it physically? Is social engineering authorized? Are you testing the wireless SSIDs? What applications are you testing? Tolerance of impact, tolerance to impact, tolerance of impact. How impactful is going to be your test that you're carrying out? So you could say, in scope, please just test my network storage. I have a network 3 terabytes or 5 terabytes or 10 terabyte disks that is connected to my network via Wi-Fi or via LAN cable. Just test that for me. And it has a simple access control. On my web server, just test my websites for me. On my intranet, I use for internal communication. On my physical security, just test that. Please don't test my email servers. They're out of scope. Don't test my e-commerce servers because I do 24/7 buy sell. Except at the point in time when I want to upgrade this application and maybe I notify my customers that I'm going to have downtime for 3 hours. But for now, please don't test it. For database servers, don't test it. For public Wi-Fi, don't test it. Same thing with scheduling. Are you there? You can schedule the timing that you want. Should you be performing during peak or off-peak periods, or should it be about holidays, right? Okay, other scoping considerations are whitelist versus blacklist, security expectations. What are you testing? IPS, intrusion prevention system, WAFs. What are the risks? How do you avoid? How do you transfer? How do you mitigate? How do you accept? Now, this is a risk mitigation or a risk management strategy. All of the things you have here, you call them risk management strategy. So because you carrying out penetration testing is a risk. So you need to plan how you're going to carry out that risk or how you're going to control that risk. So the first thing you want to do is avoid. For instance, if you say, don't test my e-commerce server, you're simply avoiding it. If you want to transfer the risk, you can say, okay, please test it, but I want to make sure that you test it, but it is never down. So of course, that's going to come at a very high cost. Even for a company to accept to do that, we have to do a lot of base testing, a lot of, especially if you have your application deployed to cloud, for instance, in Amazon or Google or Azure, where you have load balancing or where you have a kind of mirrored servers, so that once one access is down, you have the mirrored application actually being served. So on mitigation, how do you control? Do you want to do this in a kind of a sandboxed environment? Accept, or do you want to be able to accept the risks, analyze it within limits? So summary of our module 1, which is panel scoping, is the first step for most penetration testing engagement. It is important to understand why you need to pen test. You don't just wake up and say, I want to pen test this organization. No, it doesn't happen that way. You need to first plan, right? You need to know who you are even doing your final report to, right? You need to know the reasons. You need to properly scope, right? You need to understand the time of the day. You need to understand what defensive measures are you going to be doing a risk management, kind of have a risk management strategy. You also need to understand the legal framework, the legal considerations you need to know. You need to know if you have third-party integrations to what you're testing, so that you take permission or you have them out of scope. You need to make sure that you have a written agreement, right? A written agreement is sole scope of work, a non-disclosure agreement. You need to have that in place so that you're out of jail. Okay, that is the end of module 1. So I'm going to start module 2 in the next slide.